absolutely about the relationship between the organisation and its environment. For about a generation, we've had management thinking fetish on efficiency and an assumption the world's stable. There are no strategic environments where you're the only actor. Yes. So if you're not taking into account what everybody else is doing, what's the chances it's going to work?
Welcome to Strategy Meets Reality podcast. I'm your host, Mike Jones. Today I'm joined by systems thinker and strategist Patrick Hoverstadt, co-author of Patterns of Strategy. In this episode, we'll explore why conventional strategy fails, how relationships shape your real strategic direction, and how understanding fit, power and time unlocks more actionable, adaptive choices. Welcome to Strategy Meets Reality podcast. Today I'm joined by Patrick Hoverstadt. Give us a bit of context about you and what you've been up to lately.
Usual stuff, really. So we do stuff around organisation design, we do stuff around strategy, we do stuff around modelling business ecosystems, we do stuff around transformation. And some of the organisational stuff is in multi-agency systems and, that sort of stuff. So I've been doing some of all of that recently. Been doing some strategy stuff, been doing some ecosystem modelling last week, I think. Picking up some work we've done previously with a client. So same as, wide range of organisations, public sector, private sector, third sector. So yeah, that's that.
I'd love to pick more about the ecosystem modelling as we go through the conversation. But let's dive in then. So a great question to start with. How do you define strategy and how does that challenge the conventional thinking?
I've got a formal definition, which, since I can't remember it verbatim, I'm going to sort of paraphrase. Really, for strategy is about changing the fit between, the organisation. Let's say it's an organisation we're doing strategy for. Changing the fit between that organisation and its strategic environment to its advantage. You do that by changing basically how it uses power and time. So there's three critical dimensions: fit, power and time, and it's working with those really. And generally speaking, you're changing the power and the time and a bit of the way it fits in order to change the overall fit. But it's absolutely about the relationship between the organisation and its environment, or with key actors in its environment. And because we're looking at it systemically, the focus is on the nature of the relationship. So, conventional strategy tends to be, you either look at the organisation, you start with the organisation, or you start with the market, typically, and then you're trying to work out something about one from the other. What you do in systems really is focus on the nature of the relationship. It's the relationship that matters. The reality is the dynamics of those relationships are what drives strategic direction. It's not the plan. It's not what we wanted to happen. It's those relationships that we're locked into and where they're naturally going. So strategy is about basically understanding that, getting a grip of it. Once you understand the relationships, then you can do so much about it.
That really brought challenges against the conventional wisdom of strategy. Mainly, you see it there. So. Yeah, they're really focused on sort of inside out. But I'd mainly argue most of just focused inside.
Yeah.
And also, that word "to your advantage" is, I think, is quite crucial because it breaks off the dominant thing about it's just all about winning. And actually opens up a different perspective about collaboration. Definitely for third sector and public sector. It's not all about winning, it's about collaboration and relationships.
And private sector as well, Mike. Before we were doing strategy work, and I remember the first conference paper I ever wrote, which is around the development of medium-sized businesses and how they grew, right? And I noticed the same pattern. Take 10 organisations that we worked with that had grown and prospered in the medium-sized sector. And what we saw was that in 9 out of 10, they followed exactly the same strategy, and it was a collaboration strategy. It wasn't competitive. They grew, they prospered because they were collaborating well. And that was the trick, that's what propelled them through to grow 4 or 5 times in size,
Yeah.
So I think that's, it's true. Private sector, public sector and third sector.
And I think that's good to see. There's more of a there's more of a dynamic interplay when you think about strategy, and organizations, I think, get locked into this aspiration first approach, which is regardless of what's happening externally to the organization, we're going to have an aspiration. In most strategies normally are going to be around, we're going to be the best at X, or we've got the most incredible thing.
Yeah.
Well, we know that's not strategy. It's just an aspiration.
Yeah.
So where's your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's going back to the thing. I mean, I can't cut across you with the and private sector. The thing you were saying before that, Mike, I think is absolutely bang on. So most conventional strategy, that it's kind of rooted in a just, we want to do this or we want to be this, you know. So I mean, a lot of it goes sort of vision, mission, strategy, blah blah blah. You know, plan and whippy-doo, which would be great if it worked, but most of the time it doesn't work. And the vision bit is the aspiration, and the plan is basically just us, you know. And I mean, obviously, you know, you think about this in terms of the relationship with the environment. Obviously, that misses out the fact that everybody else, you know, there are no strategic environments where you're the only actor. Yeah. So if you're not taking into account what everybody else is doing, what's the chances it's going to work? I mean, they're not good, are they? You know?
No.
So systemically, you kind of go, yeah, if you're just basing it on what you want to do and how you're going to do it, you'd expect that to work maybe 10% of the time, you know, because it's going to hit what other people are doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And what we find in terms of the survey results works about 10% of the time.
Yeah. But organisations still seem to be wedded in this idea, and I suppose people that probably follow you or follow me will probably sort of fed up of us talking about this in the way that why are we still going on this so-called conventional route of strategy when we know that it's not working, and it's definitely not going to carry on working as we become more unpredictable.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you've got a psychology background and I haven't, but so this is all your fault, really. But I'm fascinated because quite often, you know, I get strategy clients where they kind of expect to do that, you know, vision, mission, blah blah blah, and they know it's not going to work, but they still want to do it. And I suppose some of that's the security blanket of that's what I was taught at business school, and you know, if I stand up and do a talk and say, right, this is what the failure rate of conventional strategy is, nobody ever goes, no, it's not. It's actually, you know, far less than that. It doesn't happen. Everybody knows it doesn't work. But there's some weird thing going on that people, well, you know, it's the old thing, isn't it? It's easier to split an atom than to, you know, get someone to change their mind, you know. So I think it is that. It's
Yeah, and I suppose we're trying to fight against a whole industry where based on the fact that you know, and time. I want to come back to time in a moment because it all comes to an industry, because every year they'll have an off-site because that's the thing we do.
Yeah.
And then they'll probably spend most of their time, as I always joke around, throwing tennis balls at each other, building marshmallow towers, because that's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we squabble over a vision statement, mission statement, and behaviours, which blows my mind because we're trying to recreate a whole, I suppose, behavioural look of the organisation every year. And then we turn it into a house on a PowerPoint deck, and it just seems to be rinse and repeat that happens.
Yeah. Greek temple. Yes, another Greek temple. You know.
Yes.
4 pillars, or 5 pillars, none of which are actually to do with, you know, are actually strategy. They're all, you know, but basic stuff that okay, great, lovely, but it isn't going to get you where you want to go, you know.
No. And again, because arguably it's all inside focused. They're just
it's
looking
all inside
at
focused. Yeah. It's all.
They're not looking
focused.
at that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the closest it gets to the outside world is, and we want to be number one or whatever it is, you know.
Yes.
But that's. I mean, you've come out of the military, haven't you? I mean, if you tried doing, you know, military strategy like that, what would happen?
Oh, it'd be carnage.
Not in a good way.
No, it'd be carnage. Again, because in the military, the first question we always ask is, you know, what's the situation? How does it affect us? We're looking at the external environment and understanding.
You're looking at terrain, You're looking at what the enemy might do. You're looking at, everybody else around, and that's built in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't
And
do any
then
of
that's
that in
what,
conventional business strategy.
no, and that information is then what starts to inform
Yeah.
what we do, the aspiration essentially, but it's not an
Yeah.
aspiration. But
Yeah, but your
yes, that's why.
strategic intent is in that context, isn't it? It's built from that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not. It's not sort of doesn't just come in.
And that's what I find most surprising when I left the military and I went into organisations and looked at how they'd done strategy. I was sort of taken aback.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, it's lovely. I mean, the whole vision mission. Get a plan and it'll all work out swimmingly. It's a totally plausible story, and it would be absolutely fine if it worked. But I mean, the hard fact is it doesn't work most of the time. So what are we doing?
Well,
Frankly.
yeah, and what gets me, and I'll be love to hear your perspective on this. And I've been thinking about this for quite a bit. Is around. It seems to be every time they go to strategy, it's almost like they're trying to recreate the purposeness of their organisation, where we know that we know what the organisation's there for. Well, we should do, and that's not fundamentally going to change every year that we've constructed in our head. All it is what's changing is our fit in the external environment, and that's what we need to try and keep a handle on.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, if you do a comparison with the military, there's a sort of there's a series of things, aren't there, from sort of grand strategy, which is kind of where are we in the world,
Yes.
Who should we be allied with? Who should we not be allied with? Who should all that sort of stuff. And I mean, you can see that playing out now over Trump, Putin, China, Ukraine. That's grand strategy stuff.
Yeah.
The strategy stuff is how do we fight this battle? How do we fight this campaign? And then you get into sort of tactical stuff and all that. Now, if you translate that all into business, what people talk about strategy isn't strategy. It's like grand strategy. It's where should we play?
Yeah.
There's nothing that fills the gap that strategy does in the military, in business. You go straight from the grand strategy to the plan, which is, in military terms, kind of order of battle stuff,
Yeah.
And the tactics. So there's a gap in the business kind of lexicon of how you do this that would be filled by strategy in the military, but there hasn't been that set of techniques,
No, because if you look at a lot of what people were used to when developing strategy, you've got canvases galore at the moment.
Yeah.
I think everyone's scrapping to find a canvas.
Yeah.
Or you've got Roger Martin's I forgot what he calls it, but his thing was aspiration capabilities. Again, it's that level, that fractional level higher in the grand strategy, where you're not redoing that every year or every so often.
No, I mean that should be pretty damn constant. You might shift it in a decade, but you really, really shouldn't be shifting that often, because when you do that, you've got to change like all your infrastructure and stuff, because that's all geared to that. So that's big stuff to shift. So if you take something like, I don't know, like BP deciding it's going to go into renewables, that's that level of shift. We're going to go from oil and gas to this. And with it comes we need to learn completely new technologies now.
Yes. You're fundamentally changing the whole capability of the organisation.
Whereas strategy should be, this is what we've got. This is the situation we're in. Right, now what do we do? What do we do in this situation to get us into a better place? And it's much shorter term, really. Good strategy is,
And that's where, time, and I know there's a slight difference between what we mean time in patterns, which we'll come on to, but time in the sense of when we think about a grand strategy and strategy, time is rarely a thing that I've seen in documents. The only thing that I see time is referenced as is the cycle, which is a construct that we've made up around, most public organisations are a 5-year planning cycle because of that's the funding that they give. So construct themselves, not beyond that. And, civilian organisations do the same thing. But really, when you think about time in the external environment is really important, because if we say we're going to do something because it's nature of the fit, we need to do it within time.
Massive. Yeah, it's a massive thing, isn't it? So I remember talking to Steve Morlidge, who used to run the Beyond Budgeting group, which was in Europe, which was a bunch of blue chip organisations trying to work out how to do finance better. And this Beyond Budgeting, because of course the budgeting was an annual cycle, and it locked, one of the problems that we were trying to wrestle with is it locked organisations into an annual cadence, which is like, well, you do it on the agricultural year, and of course that's fine if the world's moving at that pace, but the world isn't moving at that pace, So sometimes you need to move a lot faster, and sometimes you need to move slower. It's why on earth would you do it like that? And as you say, a lot of organisations are locked into this 5-year planning cycle, and I mean that's inherited from the Soviet system. I mean, how well did that work?
Yeah.
This was Stalin's 5-year plans.
Well,
yeah, that's good.
There's no doubt there's a lot of uni students, if they're watching this, they're probably saying, yeah, of course it works. But in reality, once you finish uni, we know it doesn't. But that brings a really interesting point, and often I get challenged about this, because me and you, we often talk about the dynamic approach, and with execution as well. You need to be adaptable, self-organizing. But finance is a constraint to that, because if we're locked in, it can prevent people from being adaptable. So what do you recommend to leaders to try and square that one?
Well, there are lots of time. Well, first thing is understand the rate of change in your environment, because basically, and the equation is your organisation's got to be able to change about as fast as your environment's changing. Otherwise, if you can't keep up with that, you're dead in the, probably not even in the long run, in the medium term. So have an understanding of how fast that's changing. And most people haven't got a clue, which is not a great start, and it helps to look ahead on that. If you look, you can tell how fast it's changing, You really can. And sometimes it's surprising. I mean, I remember doing some stuff with on IT, and I asked a bunch of IT guys, right, how fast does the hardware market change? And they went, oh, it's very change all. No, it actually isn't. It's pretty regular. It's like a 10-year cycle. So platforms change on basically roughly a 10-year cycle. So when the next one's coming, and you can plan for it. So it'll change, and it'll be reasonably stable, and then it'll change. Sectors change at different rates. Aerospace changes quite slowly. IT actually changes quite slowly. The hardware bit, software's faster, but it's not actually super fast. It's an operational level, it is. Strategically, it's not. So the first thing is understand how fast your sector's changing. Gear up to be able to change at that rate. So, like you say, some of the things like finance is a constraint. So is technology. If you've got to change your tech base, that's a big problem, and skills and all those sorts of things. One of the easiest things to change, though, is the rate of decision making.
Okay.
Well, because if you've got a senior management team who are doing the strategy, and it takes them 2 years to make a decision, and that's I've had strategy teams where it took 4 years. For something coming in, to them going, oh, that's a thing, to actually make a decision about it could be 4 years. Well, that's half a dozen people. 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, people. That's all you've got to check. If you can cut that down from 4 years or 2 years or whatever it is to a week, and that's not that hard to do, you've just saved yourself 2 years' time. You've given yourself 2 years extra flexibility. That you're giving the organisation, which might be 1,000 people. 10 people have changed, which means gives 1,000 people in the organisation an extra 2 years to do the changes that they need. Well, that's a no-brainer, isn't it? So I think understanding those things, and there are lots of things you can do to speed up the organisation.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because also not only does it give time back, but also increases your choices. Yeah. Because the sooner you make decisions, you've got more choices.
Yeah. I mean, this is very John Boyd OODA loop, isn't it? The speed of your decision making is can be a critical advantage, really.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think that comes into the idea of time in patterns of strategy. Just define what you mean by time for patterns.
well, because it's a relational view of the world. Okay, so we're looking at us in relation to some other, entity. So it could be a market sector, it could be an individual organisation, it could be, a group of organisations. But essentially, what we're looking at there in the time dimension is, are we faster or slower or roughly synchronized with this other entity that we're coupled to? And sometimes you need to be faster, and sometimes you need to be slower, and sometimes you need to be synchronized. So strategically working out, well, first of all, what's the differential between the two? Are we faster?
Yeah.
Are we slower? Are we synchronized? And then working out what it should be and then making it happen,
Yes.
So, if you're in collaboration, I mean, we've had loads of strategy exercises where, what they need to do is collaborate. And one of the things to play with there is slowing you down so that you can collaborate, because then you're moving at the same speed as the other party, and that makes it easier to collaborate.
Yeah.
In competition, quite often we need to speed up. Situation where the world's moving, suddenly the world's picked up speed, which happens. It can be trundling along at a rate, and then suddenly it accelerates off. And I mean, everybody's talking now about, this is a seriously VUCA moment in time.
Yeah.
Well, you better speed up then.
Well,
at least, as you say, to create the options.
yeah, and you see this as well, just on what we were talking about using a bit of futures and actually looking not only at the future, but also looking at the external environment, because this speeding up part, this has forced Europe at the moment to try and speed up exponentially. And you could probably argue, are they going to try and speed up faster than that they can handle, which then is going to cause some other issues? And you could say a lot of that is because I'm sure they must have had people looking, thinking, if Trump gets in, what are the likely scenarios that we're going to be faced, and are we ready for that? And it's almost as if they've just remained reactive, which decreases their choices and now puts them in a position that you could argue is a bit vulnerable.
I think so. And I mean, this, we're talking about it in a sort of geopolitical military context, but the same thing applies in business context. So in this case, if you look at the situation, facing Europe's political leaders and military leaders, part of that's technological. So, you've got the tech in the military that you've got. If you want to gear it up faster, what are you going to do? It takes a long time to develop new kit. Well, it does now. It didn't used to, but it does now. So that's kind of drag on things. But we have the same thing in business. You suddenly want to change, and there will be bits of the business, there'll be aspects of the business that really don't change fast.
And I think that brings a good point when we talk about, speeding up or increasing. It's quite easy when you do it with strategy with people, leaders. They'll just say, we just need to be faster. And you're like, oh, well, yeah. Obviously.
But
I think,
I'll just get the magic wand out.
And this is it. We're trying to wrestle with these two things. One is the external environment, our good model of it, and also one of the internal environment and our model of that. And it's about being specific, saying, yes, we need to speed up, but we need this part of the organisation.
That bit.
That bit. Yeah. And not all of it.
Yeah.
And I think this is where execution becomes very difficult, because we with the grand strategy, or not the grand strategy, but the conventional view of strategy, where they've got the levels mixed, they're trying to change the whole organisation, where they don't need to change the whole organisation. They just need to change parts of the organisation.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, I mentioned before that we've had cases where, you look at it and you go, right, if we can speed up the rate of the decision making of the board, that involves getting 10 people to alter their behaviour. Whereas if, that saves us 2 years, gives us extra 2 years to change the behaviour of the 1,000 people in the organisation. That's going to help. And sometimes you can do that. Well, if we, ideally we want to change this, but if we change this, that's going to give us more time, where it's going to make it easier to do that. But in execution terms, if you've got your strategy well understood, like this is the nature of the fit and this is what we need to change, we need to speed this up, And then you've got a decent understanding of your organisation. You can be really specific. You can go, yeah, it's that, and that. They need to change in these ways. That's the plan. We don't need to
Yes.
change it all. It's those bits, and they need to change in these specific ways. Thank you very
Yes.
much. That'll do. You know,
Yeah.
and that just cuts down the burden of execution massively. Typically, because it's usually only a relatively small proportion of the organisation that needs to change. It might only be like 5% in some cases.
Yeah.
It's rarely it's going to be more than 25%. But if you look at how they do it, how it's done conventionally, it's like we're going to sheep dip the whole organisation in this stuff,
Yes.
and everybody's going to have to be, and it
Yeah.
never happens.
No. And a lot of the time when you've got your strategy that's understood, there's stuff that you've already got the capability. You're just going to redirect it in a slightly different way. You're going to give an intent to them to use it, or there may be slight capability shifts you need to do, and obviously you'll go through the change. Or that's where the relationship between the strategy and the organisation and the organisation's strategy need to be understood as an input to understand actually how much or how little
How
can
could
we
we do that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And some things you can sort of speed up. So, I'm absolutely with you on, usually it's right, we've got this capability, let's turn it in a different direction. Occasionally, well, sometimes it's and we need this extra capability, and sometimes you can build that, and sometimes you just have to buy it,
Yeah,
We'll do a partnership with these guys because they've got that. Thank you very much,
And I think that's where the time comes in, because obviously if you need to do it within 18 months or shorter, then that's going to be a thing to go, well, can we actually self-create it, or do we need to outsource it?
Yeah. I remember doing this with global play. I don't know what they were, 70,000 people or something, and we were working with part of it, and they needed to build a computer science capability. But to do that, they had to offload. This group had to offload a load of work that they were already doing in order to create the space to be able to build and that took them. I think it took them just over a year. Now they could have bought it in, except they wouldn't have been allowed because they're part of a bigger organisation. They wouldn't have been allowed to buy it in. If they'd been totally free, they could have bought it in. But actually, it took them as long as it took them. They had to offload a load of work, create the extra budget, then they could build this thing. Which was, I think it was like 5%, something like that. It's less than 10%, might have been 7% of their organisation size was the new thing.
And this is really, it's quite easy for us to sit on here and talk about this because we intimately know it and we practice it every day. Where we're trying to obviously help leaders is think about how's that relevant to them. And I think coming back to the ecosystem and why is that so important, the external environment, making them understand how actually, well, one, to understand it, two, how to let it inform your strategy can be really useful, because then you can get this granularity that we're talking about. Once you get that granularity, it's easier to execute.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's as you said, it's being specific about it, and I think the other thing I've found, Mike, is that using patterns of strategy, it's so quick to do. It's so quick to do.
It is.
And you can do the what if experiment. You can do okay, so if we did this, how would that work, and what we need to do, and that's not going to work because we'll never get that to happen in the time we need. Okay, another strategy. And you can do that you can do multiple of those really, really fast,
Yeah.
Lucy, who developed the approach with, and I had a client, and this kind of shadow team came to us and said, the board's thinking about 3 strategies. We don't think that's a rich enough set of things. Could you come up with some more? And we just sat down and went through the catalogue of patterns of strategy and went, yep, that would help. Nope, that wouldn't help. Yep, that would help. But then they wouldn't be able to execute it. Done. That would. What would this one look like? Well, it would look like this with this. And after about an hour and a quarter, we had a stack of like 20 odd strategies that they could play out. and how they would help and what they would look like. And it was, I mean, incredibly quick to do, including, they won't be, yes, in theory, but no, in practice, they couldn't do that. They couldn't do that. Either they haven't got the capability or they couldn't do it in time or,
Yeah. Yeah, just for context for listeners, when we're talking about the patterns, in pattern strategy book, there's about, correct me, it's about 120.
There's 80 in the book and there's 112 that we've collected in total now. So there's 80 in the book when we got to that. So Lucy in particular carried on collecting after we finished the book. So, yeah.
It's like collecting Pokemon.
It's like collecting Pokemon. Yeah, I mean, when we were they were accidental, actually, Mike. So what we were after was not the patterns. What we were after was understanding how to understand. Well, trying to get a grip on what happens in the relationship between two organisations or an organisation, a market, whatever it might be. So what happens in those dynamics that is driving the strategic direction you're going. So it was getting a handle on that. And once we got that, we just saw repeating patterns. So then we started collecting the patterns.
This blows apart the traditional view that you've really only got two choices, which is, cost leader or differentiator.
Yeah. That Porter thing, yeah.
You say that, people are screaming at the podcast right now, go, what? But,
I doubt if Michael Porter's watching, Mike.
No, exactly, yeah. I'm sure if we got him in for a coffee, you'll understand.
Yeah.
But, and that's, those things, to think that we can boil it down reductively into two things, I think that's part of the problem with strategy nowadays. We try to reduce things down into simple ideas or vague statements, which no one understands.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, just the richness of, when you look at it through the patterns lens, you go, that's quite a lot of successful strategies. That's like, 100 different ways to win. I mean, it's interesting because when we developed it, because that whole relational view is so different to the conventional view, which is just like, we want to do this. We didn't think people would get it, but people really get it. And I think it's because we all live in, as individuals, we all live in relationships, so we kind of get it, What we do, what we've conventionally done in organisations is actually weird. Because if you think about a person who behaved like we teach organisations to do strategy, if you think of a person doing that, you would run a mile from them.
Yeah.
You just go, that person's an absolute nutter, because they'd be so fixated on just what they wanted and ignoring everybody around them, and just straight at my objective's that,
Yeah.
You would. You'd spot them a mile off and you'd run like hell. Well, if you had any sense, you would,
Yeah, we'd call those people, really low in self-awareness and probably narcissist. And that's good, because once I left the military, I was really confused with the idea of strategy. And that's where, we first met, because I came across Patterns of Strategy. I read it, and it straight away, it jumped out at me. I was like, this makes perfect sense to me, in how we've always looked at strategy.
Yeah.
So that's why straight away I got in touch with you and Lucy, and I was like, I need to have a chat with you, because I've not seen anything like this in the civilian world. And I thought it was like, I thought either I was going crazy or I was just completely wrong. Could be both.
Well, I think it's a bigger shift, actually, Mike, because for about a generation, really, we've had a sort of a management thinking fetish on efficiency and an assumption the world's stable. Okay. And if the world's stable, basically you can get into a situation, or you believe the world's stable, you can get into a situation where we're doing the right stuff, and then all we need to do is be more efficient at doing the right stuff. And that's straightforward. That's all changed in the last, 10, 15 years, something like that. And there is now, nobody was talking about VUCA and all this sort of stuff before. And now it's like, it's absolutely commonplace, So you had the 2008 crash, you had COVID, and then you've got Ukraine. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
three massive shocks to the system. And we haven't, none of the world didn't settle down after the first one before the second one hit. And it didn't settle down after the second one before the third one's hit, you know? So we're in real instability. And now nobody goes, yeah, the world's stable. But the conventional approach to strategy sort of a bit works. At least in theory, it works if the world's stable. If the world's not
Yes.
stable, it's got no chance. You know? Now, I don't think it ever was stable, really, but everybody thought it was until it gets smacked in the face by the 2008 recession and then COVID and then everything. You know, all the upheavals, business upheavals that have happened as a result of Ukraine.
Yes.
And I mean, those go, you know, you don't see them all, but they've been massive. You know, price of steel's gone through the roof. You know, all these sorts of things. You know. And so now I think people are looking at it in a completely different way. But the way we were taught strategy when I was at business school assumed the world was stable.
Yes.
You know,
predictable.
It's assumed that the world was stable and you can just plan your way through it. As soon as you go, it's not stable, it's going to move. The planning idea just makes no sense at all. Now that's always been the case with the military. So the military's always based its strategy on war is chaos.
Yes.
You know, the business never has until now.
No, and we still all live by, von Moltke's view of no plan survives contact with the enemy, and hence why the name of this podcast is Strategy Meets Reality, is a play on that. Yeah. What do you do? And leading on that, I know you mentioned earlier about ecosystem modelling and also the premise of relationships with the external environment.
Yeah.
So how can we help leaders understand their relationship, one, with the external environment, and then two, how do we use our understanding of the ecosystem to inform our decisions?
Well, the first thing I go to on understanding relationship is patterns as an approach, because it's dead easy to do as an approach.
Yeah.
Okay. Really, really, really easy, really, really fast. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think is quite important, sorry, this is a bit off piece, but one of the things I think is quite important is that, and you see this when you're doing patterns of strategy with people, it's actually visceral. They really, really feel it in their guts. You know, you can see them laying out. I mean, it's, for those who haven't seen it, it's like there's a deck of cards, there's a set of cards, and there's a board. It's played out on, either physically or virtually. You can see people doing that and get into and you lay out the positions of us and the counterparty, whoever that might be, and you can see people going, "That's why," you know. And it gets them in the guts. It really, really does. Now, to actually decide to move our organisation from doing what it's doing to doing something else, that's an emotional process. If senior leaders aren't emotionally engaged in that process, it doesn't happen. So they have to be. So you have to take them through a process where it's emotional. You know, they have to go through the angst. They have to get the hope at the other side and go, right, if we do this, then. Otherwise, they won't do it. They simply won't do it. So that's part one, I think, Mike. But you were kind of aiming at the ecosystem bit, I think. And that's kind of the extended, well, there's all these other relationships going on, and relationships that don't just touch us, but touch others. All of that kind of modelling that, which is not hard to do, gives you a forward view of where this is all going. You know, it's more hazy, so it's less certain. So if you do a patterns exercise, you can quite often go, oh my God, that is going to happen unless we change something. And people can be pretty certain about it. With ecosystem modelling, there are so many moving parts, it's much less predictable usually. But you can make direct predictions from it in some cases, you know, and it gives you a much, much longer view. So this is much closer to the grand strategy question, you know, of how is our world shifting? And then that helps you frame the strategy question of, right, so what should we do in the relationships we've got, or do we need to create new ones? So I think the two go very, very well together.
I do.
And for the ecosystem modelling, you don't need tons of data. You know, you can do it. I don't want to say it's kind of rough and ready, but you can do it with not desperately precise data, because it is bigger brush, you know, it's a broader sweep of time and space.
That's the thing, isn't it? We can try and get into the trap where we're trying to find the perfect information, but we all know
No,
that
yeah,
there's
there
that
never is.
element of there's
Yeah,
the element of darkness, the stuff that we just won't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
what it does give us is that introduction of futures, so it brings future plus into the
yeah,
current day,
yeah,
and it and
yeah,
it creates that shared understanding. It doesn't have to be perfect, because really what we're asking for is, are we going to maintain fit
yeah,
in this ecosystem? If not, then what stuff do we think we need to start concerning ourselves with now,
yeah,
so that we can maintain our fit over the long term?
yeah. And I think you've flagged up a really really important point. I don't think we talk about enough really, or I don't talk about enough. But there is no data about the future. The strategy is about the
Mm.
future. It's not about the past. It's not about now. It's about the future. There is no data about the future by definition. There can't be. So if you're searching for the perfect data, it doesn't exist. You know,
No,
Strategy is about creating a future, and it is an act of creation or somebody's creation. If it's not yours, it's somebody else's. Somebody else is creating your future for you. Thank you very much.
yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't the one I wanted. So that whole thing that people again have been trained for erroneously, which is do the analysis, get the data, doesn't exist. I mean, some
no,
of it does, but mostly it doesn't. So what you've got to look for again is things like trends.
yeah, yeah.
What's been happening? Is it likely to continue?
Mm.
If this thing's coming in from here and this thing's going on there, are they going to collide? You know, if you've got, we had an ecosystem modeling exercise with a client we just picked up again, and like it's an area, tech area, and one end's like stuck, just not moving, and the other end's going away at a hell of a pace. And you go, well, there's nothing holding them together. It's going to rip apart. This is going to
Yeah,
split into two sectors. So what's the strategic question? Where do you want to play? Do you want to be in the front end or the back
yes,
end? That's the strategic
yeah,
question. Yeah,
yeah.
simple.
And I
You
think
know.
that really plays at the heart of, difference between what we talk about strategy and what the conventional view of strategy is. Because I guarantee if I went into most organisations now, and not to be disrespectful to anyone, it's just what we've been conditioned to do for so
Yeah,
long. If I ask them what's your strategy, no doubt they'll pull out either a huge document of stuff, or a page that looks like a
Greek temple.
Greek temple, and it would be very superfluous, no doubt. Those of we're going to be the best at this and all this stuff, but really, when it comes down to it, it's about the choice of manoeuvres that we're going to
Mm,
make
mm.
um, to achieve fit. And that fit, the reason why I like that term fit is because it's relative to anyone given their context.
Yes.
It's where do you need to be to
Yeah.
maintain viability?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we survive. We survive as individuals, as societies, as a species, as whatever, and as organisations by having relationships that work.
Mm,
I mean, if you're not delivering some value, commercially, organisationally, if you're not delivering some value and getting some value back, you die as an organisation. It's that
yeah.
simple. All that depends on how you fit. It
Yes.
depends on your strategic fit with your environment. So that's the thing that matters. That is effectively the only thing that matters is how's that working? How's that going to go? And then everything else is about understanding that and making it work to your advantage.
And what we're not saying on this is that ignore the inside only view, but we
No,
need to balance the whole. So we need to have
yeah,
the outside in and
yeah,
the inside out approach to marry up,
yeah,
because
yeah,
they're both going to feed into constrain your strategy. Really, what's possible
yeah.
with that?
And I mean, the interesting. I mean, I've probably done like I don't know over 100 projects with this approach. 100 client exercises, put it like that. Some of them have been like
Mm.
multiple in the same organisation. I think the closest we came to not being able to crack the problem was an organisation where we could only find one strategy that would get them out of the hole they were in.
Oh,
And I didn't think they'd be able to do it, but bless them, they did, and they survived as a result. But mostly there's like loads of options, despite the fact that there's all these constraints on the outside and there's all these constraints internally. We can't do this. We could, we'd like to do that, but we can't, blah, 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 blah. We can't move that fast. We can't, we haven't got that capability. We haven't all that. And we can't move there because this would happen if we move. All those external constraints, all those internal constraints, you can still find loads of things that would work usually, and we've never ever found a situation where there wasn't a way out. So that was the closest, where there was just one route.
I bet you were sweating that day.
Yeah. I thought we weren't going to get there.
And I think that comes to my earlier point where aspiration first. I think if you focus on aspiration first, you limit your options because you're so just focused on a predetermined way rather than understanding the context.
Yeah, and there is a very, very, very good chance that somebody is going to scupper that aspiration for you, either deliberately or just accidentally, because they're not looking at it either.
No.
And the statistics bear that out. 10% survival, success rate from implementing the conventional approach, which is, honestly, would you bet the firm on a 1 in 10 chance?
No, I can't even get people to bet the firm on 99% chance.
Oh, it's just nuts, isn't it? The worst result I heard was from the great Ross Agol, which was a 98% failure rate of strategic planning. That was from a proper survey of organisations doing strategic planning. It had a 98% failure rate. So,
and I know we briefly touched on it. We don't have time on this podcast to touch it, but a lot of that is on the one is it actually a strategy, and is the strategy thought out, and two, execution. And I think execution is a whole nother beast that people constrain themselves too much.
Yes.
And they can't adapt in time. But I can attest to the success of patterns. I use it a lot, and I've used it quite a bit, and it's been very successful for the clients.
And so easy and quick to use, isn't it?
I
mean, the big thing is it works. You end up with a strategy that will actually work. And it, I don't say it's got 100% success rate, but it's a hell of a lot better than 10%.
Yeah. And it is easy to, but what I find is really good is the conversations around, because it's you're modelling. You essentially got it on the table there, and you can you visually see it, and it opens up a whole dimension of conversations you're not going to get from squabbling over a vision statement.
But be interested in your view, Mike. So, I was saying before about it being an emotional or visceral process. Have you found that?
It's the emotional part, but it's that aha moment.
Yes.
It's that bit. And I've always found with clients, when you get that aha moment, or you get that with anyone, that's the point which that action will follow.
Something has flipped then, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's crucial, and that's what it enables you to do really well.
And it kind of goes in under the skin, so it's not like you're smacking over the head with a whole new load of concepts. It's right. Simple questions.
Yes.
Who of these two organisations, who's got the most strength? Who's most innovative? Who's faster? Who's who's shaping who?
Yeah. And they're easy to understand, which I think enables the conversation. And plus, I'll say it is context free in the sense that you can apply that to any context and have a useful conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. But what I'd like to do is think about, if there's something that you would like to leave for leaders to think about, what would that be?
It's a distillation, really, of what we've been talking about. It's not forget the planning thing. It's not about the plan. Because, as you say, von Moltke, no plan survives contact with the enemy, right? What is going to determine where your organisation goes is not the plan. It is the relationships you're in. So let's get a grip of that. Let's understand why they're going to take us. Because unless we can understand that, we're just being swept along. And it's easy to do that. It's not hard to understand those relationships and where they're taking us and the forces that are driving it all. it's really, really easy to do.
I'll have to second that one as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. I always enjoy having a conversation with you, Patrick.
Likewise,
often
Mike.
we'll we often go on to random tangents. I think we've been quite good today. If you like the podcast, please, like, share, subscribe. Take care. See you later, Patrick.
Thanks,
Thank you
Mike.
very much.